Under the blistering desert sun near El Paso, Texas, the United States executed a bold and high-stakes operation targeting one of the deadliest drug, arms, and human trafficking syndicates on the planet. The objective, a heavily fortified convoy that had just breached the U.S. border. The caravan consisted of 25 armored trucks, shielded by a private army of 130 battle-hardened mercenaries. Each vehicle mounted 6-barreled rotary cannons capable of spitting out 3,000 rounds per minute, cutting down anything in their path with ruthless efficiency. Inside the trucks, 1,300 industrial drums carrying 363,000 pounds of benzyl alcohol and 334,000 pounds of unmethylformid to potent chemical precursors valued in the billions on the international black market. These substances are essential not only for producing synthetic drugs on a massive scale, but also for crafting chemical weapons capable of catastrophic devastation. Even worse, the convoy's destination lay just 7 miles from a densely populated civilian area fortified base where over 180 women and children were being held hostage by human traffickers. The stakes were higher than ever. The criminal network behind this operation had built its empire on torture, slave labor, and blood, leaving a trail of death and destruction from Mexican border towns to American cities. But this morning, U.S. military command faced a harrowing dilemma. How do you dismantle a fortress teeming with mercenaries and weaponry without endangering the lives of every innocent soul trapped inside? Could elite American forces surgically dismantle a fortress without triggering a massacre? Let's rewind. Let me show you what really happened. September 4th, 2025 to 7:45 a.m., the stillness of the desert near El Paso, just 15 miles from the Mexico border, was violently broken by an image no one thought they'd ever see on American soil. A military-style convoy, 25 armored vehicles in tight combat formation, thundered across the highway like a steel stampede. What they carried was no ordinary cargo. Inside, 1,300 barrels of hazardous chemical precursors, 363,000 pounds of benzyl alcohol, and 334,000 pounds of unmethylformid. Enough material to manufacture synthetic narcotics at industrial volumes, or worse, enough toxins to threaten the entire U.S. population if turned into weaponized agents. Surrounding this convoy was a private military force, 130 mercenaries, most of them ex-special forces or veterans of foreign wars. Each one was armed to the teeth. Mounted atop the vehicles were 6-barrel rotary machine guns, instruments of war capable of spraying thousands of rounds per minute. These were no simple drug mules. These were trained killers executing a mission for a cartel that believed itself untouchable. They thought their firepower made them invincible. They believed no one would dare stop them. But they were wrong. High above the desert sky, invisible to the eye, U.S. surveillance drones monitored every movement. Every heartbeat of the convoy was tracked in real time. Washington knew what was coming. They knew what awaited at the end of that rota base disguised as a warehouse complex, but in reality, a fortified hellhole packed with hostages and firepower. From the Pentagon, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff made it clear, if they reach that base, the cost will be measured in lives, thousands of them. We will not let this convoy disappear into steel and concrete. We stop them, whatever it takes. The cartel's enforcers may have felt untouchable, but the clock had already started ticking. Their fate had already been sealed. A storm was coming. A critical decision if you were the commander in charge. What would you have done? Do you intercept the convoy in the open desert, risking a chemical disaster and potential civilian casualties? Or do you allow them to reach the base only to launch a more precise, yet more dangerous operation? 8:20 a.m., the convoy reaches its destination. The convoy rolled into its final stop, a massive compound carved into the desert, just 7 miles from residential El Paso neighborhoods. From above, it looked like a collection of mundane storage facilities. But on the ground, it was a fortress. 15-foot reinforced steel walls for layers of razor wire 12-mounted rotary cannons, each capable of unleashing 3,000 rounds per minute. 200-plus armed guards posted at every corner, every door, every exit inside those walls. Horror. U.S. intelligence confirmed over 180 civilian hostages, women and children abducted from rural Mexican villages. Some were days from being sold on international human trafficking markets. Others were already enslaved, starving, and kept under constant threat. This wasn't just a cartel outpost. It was a breeding ground for terror, a base of operations to produce billions in drugs, shielded by human shields. If the chemicals and cash were secured here, it would become a nearly indestructible fortress of organized crime. For U.S. commanders, there was no margin for error. Airstrikes? Not an option. One wrong hit could vaporize the hostages. Missiles off the table. The risk of igniting the chemicals was too great. Only one path remained: surgical ground assault. Elite forces were already moving. Navy SEALs on the ground, UAVs above, electronic warfare teams standing by. 8 to 27 a.m. Disaster almost strikes just as the U.S. attack force finalized its positioning. A disaster nearly exposed the entire operation. A reconnaissance drone strayed too close to enemy radar. An alarm screamed through the compound. Detection now would mean failure. Exposure of 95 drones and 350 elite SEALs, all poised for simultaneous entry. At the last possible moment, U.S. cyber warfare teams unleashed a massive broad-spectrum jamming assault, pumping the enemy's radar system with decoy signals and electronic ghosts. Within seconds, the drone vanished from cartel screens like smoke into the wind. The base remained blind. The defenders never realized they were surrounded. Inside the walls, the hostages. Inside the walls, the chemicals. Inside the walls, the enemy. There would be no second chance. The trap was set. The strike was inevitable. But before we dive into the U.S. Army's tactical plan, take a moment to support the mission, like and subscribe to the channel. Now, join me as we step into the war room. By 8:45 a.m., the battlefield had already taken shape. Inside the thick steel walls of the fortress, the enemy convoy sat entrenched: 25 armored trucks, 1,300 chemical drums, and a mercenary force swelled to nearly 350 fighters, reinforced from within the base. Their confidence was unwavering. They believed their steel fortifications, heavy weapons, and use of human shields rendered them untouchable. But America's war machine was already in motion. Lying silently just beyond the perimeter were 350 Navy SEALs, split into lethal units. 50 operators were tasked with breaching the compound and securing the hostage cells. 20 snipers were positioned on rooftops half a mile out, armed with rifles capable of pinpoint accuracy at 1,200 yards. Multiple strike teams were prepped for room-to-room combat. Beneath the ground, Special Activities Division divers had already mapped out the base's drainage tunnels, preparing backup entry routes in case the walls couldn't be breached cleanly. Above them all, the skies were alive with ghosts. 95 mini UAVs, each no larger than a backpack, circled the compound silently at 500 feet. Equipped with 360-degree cameras, they streamed real-time intel to the command center in San Antonio. Each drone carried a 12-pound precision charge, small enough to minimize collateral damage, but deadly enough to shred a machine gun nest. Combined, they carried over half a ton of C4, suspended invisibly in the sky. The operation was surgical. At 9:10 a.m., 15 UAVs would dive onto the western perimeter, luring defenders into a trap of smoke and fire. At that exact moment, 50 SEALs would breach the eastern wall, heading straight for the hostage blocks. Snipers would eliminate exposed gunners within 8 seconds of acquiring their targets, while the remaining UAVs targeted rotary cannons defending the courtyard. Every movement was synchronized. Every operator knew his sector, kill zone, and fallback point. The mercenaries believed they were untouchable. In truth, their fortress had already become a chessboard, and every piece was now in America's hands. Are you still with me? Don't go yet. Let's move deeper into the heart of the battle. At 9:15 a.m., the desert ignited into chaos. From 500 feet above, the first wave of 15 UAVs struck like steel hornets. Each drone delivered its 12-pound charge with surgical precision. In mere seconds, the western wall was torn open in a cascade of explosions. One drone obliterated a guard tower, silencing a rotary cannon in a single thunderclap. Another dove through the roof of a munitions shed, igniting 6,000 rounds of stored ammunition in a chain of devastating secondary blasts. The mercenaries panicked. Over 80 fighters scrambled to the western front, firing blindly into smoke and shadows. They'd fallen right into the American trap. While enemy eyes were locked to the west, the real assault began from the east. At 9:17 a.m., 50 Navy SEALs breached the fortress using thermite charges, melting through steel in under 20 seconds. Suppressed MP7s cracked in short, controlled bursts. In just the first 2 minutes, 11 guards were taken down silently, no alarms, no resistance. The SEALs advanced in tight squads of 12, clearing corridors with flashbangs and breaching shotguns. Above them, the second drone wave descended 30 UAVs, each one seeking out rotary cannons and machine gun nests. Within 4 minutes, 9 defensive positions were annihilated. One UAV hit a fuel cache, triggering a fireball that erupted 200 feet into the air, visible all the way to El Paso. By 9:20 a.m., the snipers joined the onslaught. From rooftops and ridgelines half a mile out, 20 SEAL marksmen eliminated gunners with chilling precision. Their custom rifles turned every courtyard, every balcony, into a fatal funnel. In just 5 minutes, 23 mercenaries were confirmed kills from sniper fire alone. Inside the base, the battle turned brutal. Near the central barracks, one SEAL squad exchanged over 400 rounds with dug-in defenders. 3 Americans were hit in the shoulder, thigh, and forearm, but none withdrew. They pressed forward, grenades ripping through barricades until the final defender fell. By 9:25 a.m., the fortress was burning on 3 sides. The mercenaries, once arrogant, now terrified, scattered like prey. Their communications were crippled, their heavy weapons destroyed. In just 10 minutes, American drones had executed 47 precision strikes, each one collapsing a piece of the enemy's defense grid. But the mission wasn't over. Deep within the compound, over 180 hostages remained chained behind locked doors. Desperate guards began dragging civilians toward firing lines, hoping to use them as human shields. This was the knife's edge, the moment where victory or tragedy would be decided in seconds. At 9:27 a.m., the final command echoed through every SEAL's columns. All teams pushed to the hostage cells. No mercy for those who dared to stand in the way. The storm had only just begun. By 9:30 a.m. on September 12, 2025, the battle had reached its most critical phase. Inside the enemy fortress, U.S. Navy SEAL teams shifted focus toward the hostage blocks for massive warehouses that had been converted into makeshift prisons. Intelligence had confirmed the presence of over 180 civilians, many of them women and children, shackled inside. Guards had standing orders: execute the hostages if the compound fell. Every second mattered. Team Bravo spearheaded the assault. 12 operators advanced on the eastern warehouse, breaching the reinforced steel doors using explosive charges no larger than a clenched fist. The precision blast disoriented the guards, but left the civilians unharmed. In less than 40 seconds, 6 mercenaries were neutralized with surgical headshots. Their rifles hit the ground before a single hostage could be touched. By 9:33, 62 hostages had been freed, shaken but alive. In the central compound, resistance escalated. Roughly 70 cartel mercenaries had entrenched themselves in narrow concrete corridors guarding access to the second warehouse. They opened fire with belt-fed machine guns, unleashing a brutal barrage of 1,200 rounds in under 3 minutes. The air was choked with smoke, sparks, and ricochets. Still, the SEALs pushed forward with relentless discipline. Fragmentation grenades blasted apart kill zones. Suppressed weapons picked off defenders with quiet precision. When the smoke cleared, 29 mercenaries were dead, with another 15 wounded and captured. Above the compound, the final wave of UAVs descended. 20 drones locked on and plunged into fuel depots and weapons caches, exploding with pinpoint accuracy. The detonations ignited 4,000 gallons of diesel and obliterated crates of AK-47s, RPG launchers, and mortar shells. The resulting shockwave tore through the compound, toppling guard towers and silencing the last of the heavy guns. By 9:40, the fortress was no longer a battleground, it was an inferno. American snipers picked off remaining enemies as they tried to escape through gaps in the walls. 47 mercenaries were confirmed killed outside the perimeter. Their escape had been cut short. Inside, SEALs cleared the compound room by room, securing all four warehouses and freeing the final group of hostages. The final tally, 182 civilians rescued, none fatally harmed. At 9:45, the battlefield went silent. The numbers spoke for themselves. In just 30 minutes, 350 Navy SEALs had eliminated or captured nearly 320 mercenaries. 95 UAVs had conducted over 60 precision airstrikes, destroying millions of dollars in weapons. 1,300 chemical drums, enough to flood American streets with billions in narcotics, were seized intact. Standing in the wreckage, the American general delivered his final message. This was never just about chemicals or weapons. It was about lives, about proving that human suffering will not be traded at America's border. Any who try will find only fire and ash. The fortress, once a hub of traffickers, mercenaries, and killers, was now a smoldering ruin. In its place stood a message, etched in steel and blood: America's resolve is unbreakable. By the time the final shot faded, the desert fortress was no more. What had once been a